What if the first coder was a woman born in 1815? Before computers, before electricity, she saw a future no one else imagined. And here's the incredible story of how it happened. Before we get started, some trivia. In Britain, it was illegal to be a woman and a mathematician. In France, it was illegal to be a woman and a writer. So our heroine, the first computer programmer, went by a pseudonym. Can you guess who? Oh, well, I'll give you 3 guesses. Lady Lovelace, Ada Lovelace, Countess of Lovelace, or Augusta Ada Byron. All true. But her story starts long before any of these names. It starts with a dream. It was a dream of machines that could think like humans, machines that could do math and solve problems. In the 1840s, this wasn't science fiction. It was science impossible. But Ada Lovelace was about to make it real. Welcome to my channel. Today we are meeting Ada Lovelace. In 1815, Ada was born in London to 2 very different parents. Her father was the famous poet Lord Byron. Her mother, Annabella Milbank, was a mathematician. And so from an early age, Ada had 2 very different influences. On one side, it was the creative imagination of poetry. On the other side, the cold logic of numbers. Now, there's a myth that Ada was more interested in horses than in numbers, that she preferred animals to algebra. But this comes from a misunderstanding of her childhood. Yes, Ada loved horses. She would draw pictures of them. But she also loved numbers and logic games. She just didn't have the opportunity to study serious math. At the time, women couldn't go to university. When Ada was 8, her parents split up. Lord Byron lost custody of Ada, and he lost his life in a sword duel. All the stories about Ada's genius as a programmer start here with this man. His name was Charles Babbage. He was a brilliant inventor. He designed machines that would change the world. And when Ada was 24, she met him, and everything changed. This is Charles Babbage, inventor of the difference engine. It was a machine that looked like a giant typewriter and did only 2 things. It could add numbers and it could print them out. It wasn't a very good calculator, but it was the first programmable machine in history. Babbage wanted to build something better, much better. So he put all his efforts into his next invention. This is the analytical engine. The analytical engine was a marvel of Victorian engineering. It had gears and cogs and wheels and punch cards. It had an arithmetic logic unit, memory and input and output. In other words, it was a computer. But back then, nobody called it a computer. They called it an engine. It was supposed to help engineers calculate things. It was definitely not supposed to write poems or compose music. And that's where Ada came in, because while everyone else saw an engine, Ada saw a computer. Here's the proof. These are the analytical engine's punch cards. They control what the machine does. They tell it what numbers to use. And these were made by Ada Lovelace. She used them to write the first algorithm ever. We can still read them today, and they show us exactly how to instruct this computer to calculate anything. Basically, she wrote the instruction manual for a computer before the computer existed. Now I know what you're thinking. Punch cards? Really? Come on, that's not programming, and fair enough. These days, we don't even see punch cards as technology. But back in the 1800s, they were extremely revolutionary. Here's why. The analytical engine was never finished. Even after years of work, Babbage didn't finish it. But Ada Lovelace didn't wait for the computer to be finished. She went ahead and programmed it anyway. She created the first set of punch cards for the analytical engine in 1843. 4 years later, she wrote the first published algorithm for a machine that didn't exist yet. But there's more. Ada didn't just write instructions. She added notes, personal notes in pencil. She wrote down thoughts about numbers and machines and how they work. And in those notes, we find the first inklings of the digital revolution. For example, Ada considered whether a machine could compose music or paint a picture. Could a machine be creative, or were humans just special that way? She didn't stop at the idea of the computer as a calculator. She pushed its boundaries and explored ideas like artificial intelligence and creativity. Unfortunately, few people understood her vision. Most of the time, her notes were ignored. Some people thought she was crazy. Others thought she was a genius. But either way, they didn't care. Ada Lovelace spent most of her life in obscurity. She died in 1852 at the age of 36. Then in the 1950s, some very important people discovered her notes. 2 British computer scientists, Anthony Cordell and Herbert Wilf, found a manuscript of Ada's algorithm. At the same time, another British mathematician, BV, she knew all of Ada's notes by heart. Together, they translated her notes into modern programming language, and that's how we got the first computer program in history. Now, let me tell you something. Ada Lovelace was not the only person to discover the potential of computers. There were others. In fact, there were many. They just didn't live at the right time. They were simply born too early. Ada was born in 1815, a time when women couldn't go to university. The computer scientists of the future weren't born yet. The internet wasn't even imaginable. But Ada Lovelace was different. She was curious about everything. She wanted to know how money worked, so she studied economics. She wanted to know how trains worked, so she studied engineering. She wanted to know how machines worked, so she studied mathematics. And because she was always asking questions, she was able to see beyond the limitations of her time. She saw what a computer could become. We often think of programmers as geeks sitting in front of their screens, but that's just what they do for a living. It wasn't always like this. Programming used to be a profession for intellectuals. Back in the day, programmers were philosophers. They tried to understand what machines meant for humanity, and Ada Lovelace was the best of them all. But what about the analytical engine? What happened to Babbage's invention? Well, as I said, it was never finished. Too bad, right? Wrong, the analytical engine was finished. It just wasn't finished by Babbage. You see, Ada took the project into her own hands. When Babbage died in 1871, Ada continued working on his invention. She spent the last 20 years of her life trying to improve the analytical engine. Unfortunately, she never finished it. But it doesn't matter because she actually did finish it. She completed the first computer in history in 1843 when she wrote the first algorithm for the analytical engine. You might be surprised, but we owe the modern world to Ada Lovelace. We owe modern computing to a woman who lived in the past. Her ideas changed everything. But let me ask you a question. Why did she get lost in the history books? Well, maybe it's because she was a woman. Maybe it's because she was born too early, or maybe it's because she was unknown. Whatever the reason, her ideas only became known a century after she died. This is Ada Lovelace's grave. It looks like every other grave in this Victorian cemetery. But underneath the stone is the body of a legend. Not only was she the first computer programmer, she was also the first computer scientist. She left behind a huge collection of notes, observations, and ideas about machines. And without her notes, modern computing would not exist. If you want to learn more about Ada Lovelace, check the description. But if you want to learn more about brilliant inventors and lost geniuses, then stay tuned here on my channel. I've been your host. Subscribe now to my channel so you never miss an episode.